Hello everybody and welcome back to another revision session. So the wall of revision has grown a bit more than the last episode. So here we looked at the small intestine and the stomach, and just a quick recap. So we've got the B vitamins here, which I can remember them all now, so I'm not going to go over them. And then we've got the different cell types here. So we've got the enterochromaffin cells, enterochromaffin-like cells, G cells, D cells, chief cells, parietal cells, epithelial cells, and mucous neck cells. So I can remember all of this. So I know that enterochromaffin cells do serotonin, VIP, and substance P. Then the like cells do histamine, G cells do gastrin, fairly easy to remember. D cells do somatostatin, which is the big stomach inhibitor. Chief cells do pepsinogen, which is then cleaved into pepsin. Parietal cells do intrinsic factor. Epithelial cells do, I do struggle to remember epithelial cells and mucous neck cells. So epithelial cells secrete hydrogen carbonate, and mucous neck cells secrete mucus. It is fairly easy to remember, but I just forget they exist. And we've also added some more things to the sheets as well. So we've got the glands. So at the back of the mouth, just below your cheekbones, there's a parotid gland, and then there's two glands sort of like underneath your jaw. There is the submandibular gland and the sublingual gland. I'm not very good at talking. And in the esophagus, it is lined by stratified squamous epithelia. And I think that is pretty much it from last episode. Now if we move on to the gastrointestinal wall, so what I've learnt, there are 4 basic structural layers. We have the mucosal layer, which you can see here, and that is the first layer that is in contact with, what do we call that? I'll just call it with the substances, the chyme, yeah. So this is where we have the villi and the microvilli, and so obviously it's got the epithelial cells, and then it's also got lamina propria, which is like most of this stuff here. In the diagrams it did look very similar to dermis in the skin, and it's also got thin muscularis mucosae, which is like sort of like a film around it. Then we have the submucosal layer, and then this is like connective tissue, glands, and large blood vessels. I mean, if we're thinking about layers of the skin, I know them off by heart. I think that's sort of like subcutaneous, how do you say it, like the adipose layer. And then we have the smooth muscle layer. So we've got mixtures of circular and longitudinal muscle layers, and of course they've got enteric neurons between them. And then finally, as the outside layer, sort of like the wrapping paper for the whole intestine wall, we have the serosa layer. Bit of a tricky name to remember, it's serosa, and it's just sort of like a thin outer layer made up of squamous epithelial cells. And there we go, that is the gastrointestinal wall. Now if we move over here to the stomach, you've got a big diagram drawn by me that I wouldn't say is very good, but it's got all the information on there that you need. So there are multiple different regions to the stomach. We did do this last episode as well. Bit of a better drawing now, but so we have the esophagus, and then the lower esophageal sphincter here. I forgot to use the American spelling by accident. There we go. That's 2 separate words there. Lower esophageal region. Not region, sphincter. And then we have the fundus here, which is the bit above the sphincter, and then the body, or the corpus, and then the antrum, the pylorus sphincter, and then the duodenum, however you say it. And then so the ORAD region, that is like the top half, and then as you can see here, the ORAD region is thinner walls to allow relaxation for receiving food. So this bit is sort of just more stretchy. So then if you eat loads, your stomach won't burst, basically. And then we have the caudate region. So, not sure if you can see it very easily in this diagram, but the walls are a lot thicker than the ORAD region. So the caudate is thicker than the ORAD, and that is because it needs to be able to like contract. So the caudate region contracts, and this forces food into the past the pylorus sphincter, and then into the small intestine with the duodenum. Now, so what we call sort of like the mix of foods with gastric juice, we call this chyme. So chyme is a mixture of foods, obviously, with hydrochloric acid, pepsin, intrinsic factor, and mucus. Now, you might be wondering what intrinsic factor is. Intrinsic factor is a hormone. I think it's a hormone. It's a factor that's used to promote vitamin B12 absorption. So that's cobalamin, as we can see here, the absorption of cobalamin. And as we can tell from everything that's absorbed in the small intestine. So cobalamin is, so that's B12 here, absorbed in the ileum, despite the rest of its B vitamins being absorbed in the jejunum. So that means that B12 is bigger, so having intrinsic factor makes it easier to absorb. Finally, in today's lesson, we have the digestive system meeting the nervous system. Now, I'm not sure if this is blurry, so I might just stand up to make it a bit easier. So, we have a definition here. Peristalsis is the involuntary muscle movement that moves food through the gastrointestinal tract. So peristalsis is just sort of like the contractions moving food down the entire tract. So as we can see here, we've got a diagram of the esophagus. Here we have the upper esophageal sphincter, and then here we have the main bit of the esophagus, and then we have the lower esophageal sphincter, and then that leads into the stomach here. So we have the swallowing reflex. So the first part of the reflex is the upper esophageal sphincter closing. So that just fully shuts off here, and then this causes the primary peristaltic wave. So that is the first wave of contractions down the esophagus. Now, this number 3 is more of a just in case this happens. So in case there is still like a lot of distension in the esophagus, so distension is like the overextension. So let's say that your stomach is really bloated, you'd have a distended stomach. And that's the same in the esophagus. So, in case this happens, the enteric nervous system, which is the nervous system controlling the GI tract, initiates a second peristaltic wave. So that's a second wave of closing occurring down the esophagus, just to try and clear it. Then obviously we've still got the lower sphincter. So we've got all this food moved down to the bottom. And then we have the vagovagal reflex. I'm not sure if that's correct. That was what was on my PowerPoint, but I'll double check that later. So that controls the tone of the lower esophagus, so sort of like just how tight it is. And then I think this is either parasympathetic or periphery. The sheet just said PNS, but yeah, the PNS vagus nerve, we just want I'll just go with the vagus nerve for now. So vagus nerve, that releases a peptinergic neurotransmitter, which is VIP, to open the lower sphincter. So then we have like the upper esophagus sphincter closing, peristaltic waves carrying the food down, and then the vagus nerve causes the lower sphincter to open. And then afterwards, this sensory feedback is sent back to the brain. Now, finally, for the neuronal control. So a quick definition here, a plexus is a network of interconnected nerves or neurons. So I haven't quite highlighted this, but I can do this along with everything. So the GI tract is regulated by 3 divisions of the autonomic nervous system. So that is like parasympathetic and sympathetic. Let me get my highlighters out. Alright, so 3 divisions of the autonomic nervous system. So first we have the extrinsic, which is sympathetic and parasympathetic. And then secondly we have the intrinsic, which is the enteric nervous system. Which is the primary mechanism, as we can see here. So the ENS has 2 main plexuses, so 2 main networks of interconnected nerves or neurons. And parasympathetic ganglia, so ganglia is also just like a ball of neurons basically. So a specific part of the plexus relays parasympathetic impulses to gastrointestinal effectors. So basically what this means is that parasympathetic ganglia, so rest and digest ganglia in the interconnected nerves and neurons, they relay rest and digest impulses to effectors. So basically it sends information from the autonomic nervous system to the gastrointestinal tract. So ENS nerve fibres are a mixture of afferent and efferent, which means that they're either sending signals or receiving them, and these are all coordinated by the plexus. Finally, just to go on to this bit as the last point, so parasympathetic postganglionic neurons, they are either cholinergic or peptidergic, and sympathetic ones are adrenergic, which means that they use noradrenaline, or if you're American, norepinephrine. And yeah, that is everything we've done so far on the GI tract, and hopefully you've found this video interesting. It might just be me watching it back for revision, and I'll see you another day. Bye!